Well, I am sitting in place not vlogging, so you know what that means. It's the one time a month that I sit down and talk about the books that I have read for the previous month, being October, which is one of my favorite reading months, I would say, majority of the time. I love reading in October. I feel like it's the perfect vibe. It's the perfect weather for the most part, and it's one of the most perfect seasons. So I want to jump into all the books that I read for October, which I had a total of 14 books that I read this month, which I feel like is pretty good. I honestly feel like that's pretty close to the number that I read in September, and that actually brings me to a total of 115 books. I was 15 books, guys. I would be crying. 115 books for the year so far, and I have 2 months left now to read 15 books. That's all that I needed for my goal of 130. So I feel like we're doing pretty good. Hi, Etta. I feel like we're doing pretty good on time. I feel like I'm pretty ahead. I think my Goodreads goal thing says that I'm 7 books ahead. So I'm doing really good. I'm also almost done with one book, and I'm in the middle of an audiobook. So that's 2 more books right there that I'm almost gotten to. So we'll kind of talk about that as I'm talking about the books that I read for the month, but I didn't finish them, so technically not. I actually did have 2 books that I kind of DNF'd. I want to say soft DNF, because I got most of the way through them, and then I was I don't care anymore, and I just kind of skimmed. So I wouldn't say that I didn't read the book or I didn't finish the book, but I think one of them I soft DNF toward the end, and then the other one I just kind of stopped reading at towards the start, so I actually DNF that one. But I still count it as a book because I, for the most part, know what was happening, and yeah, I read the majority of it, so I'm gonna count it as a book. Sorry. Book I read physically, I was actually reading it on the train on the way back from Chicago, and it was pretty good. I had tried to read a couple of different books at the start of the month. I started Atlas 6 actually, which I didn't end up getting to this month, but it is going to be in my November TBR. Hopefully I get to it this time. I was trying to read that one on the train, but I kind of decided that I wanted to be able to focus on it better, and I wanted to annotate, but I didn't have my annotating supplies. So I decided to put it off for now, and I'm going to try and read it hopefully this month. I just wasn't really in a fantasy mood, and I was kind of struggling to focus. So I tried to pick up a couple other books, and I was finally I was you know what? I'm going to read this one because it's short. It's pretty seems like a pretty quick read, and it was. I want to say that this was a contemporary fiction kind of book. It dealt very heavily with, it did have topics of a very sexual nature. I feel like the book dealt with mental health and kind of used a lot of sexual terminology, which I feel it was very fitting for the book. I don't count that against the book, but I just don't think that it was a book that is very I don't think that that type of writing is something that I typically lean forward. But I did really enjoy the book. I've read a novel, I want to say it was her debut novel, but I'm not sure if that's right. But I've read a book by this author before, and I loved the book. I literally started it as a library book, and then I was this is too good, I need to own it. So I bought the book just so that I could annotate it. So this book definitely didn't, maybe this is her debut novel actually. I don't remember, guys. I'm so sorry. But I don't think that this one quite measured up, but I also feel like they were 2 very different books, and I feel like any author who has so much dimension that they can write 2 books that are kind of the same genre but also very different is amazing. I think that this author is such a stunning writer, and I really enjoyed a lot of the concepts, but I feel like it did kind of have this, there was just a lot of things different cultural references, sexual, kind of brought it into this sexual nature and these cultural things that I just didn't quite understand some of it. But I do think that the mental health conversation was so important, and I feel like this is a book that I would definitely recommend to people. It just wasn't a favorite necessarily for me, and maybe I'll reread it at some point and like it more, but I did end up giving this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So the next book I read was The Measure by Nikki Erlich. This book I gave 3 stars. I thought that I was gonna like this one a little bit more because it was actually recommended by my mom, and I ended up borrowing it from her after she read it, and she loved it. And it's basically about everybody in the world suddenly gets a package that contains a string, and they end up figuring out through like some research that the string is meant to determine how long, like however long the string is, it determines how long your lifespan is, or the rest of your lifespan. So like it just kind of ends up becoming like very political, very, you know, and it has a very dystopian political kind of energy. Just a lot of people, like different organizations and changes in like economics, and just basically how messed up society is. And I did really enjoy this book, and I felt like it did have a lot of really interesting topics. I just don't think that it was something, like the writing wasn't necessarily something that intrigued me a ton. I felt like I had a hard time keeping up with what was happening. And there was also like a lot of different characters. I feel like they were trying to get you to like kind of attach to the characters, but I feel like I was more so just interested in like it in a world change kind of way. Like I feel like people can read that and just really get a good message from it, and I feel like I cared more about that than the characters. So also I didn't like the way that the ending wrapped up. So I don't know, I'm not very good at explaining things like my feelings about this type of thing, but I think it was a pretty good book. I just don't know, like it wasn't something that I would probably like reread. I actually listened to 9 audiobooks this month, and I only read 5 books physically, which I think kind of tells you where my mental state has been, just because I've been at work so much in October, and I just really honestly didn't have a lot of time to read. And even when I did have time to read, I just wasn't in the like mental headspace. I had so many other things to do when I wasn't at work. So it was just it was a difficult month, I would say, but also good. Like I do feel like I had a good reading month. It was just a lot of mystery thriller audiobooks, and I'm okay with that, you know? I'm okay with it. But yeah, I read The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. I think it was pretty good. It is a book about a girl who is dating a guy, and he seems like the perfect guy, but then he's kind of shady, and it deals a lot with like her friend. Then there's like different things with like her friend's boyfriend is kind of shady. Then there's her other friend goes missing, and there's just kind of a lot of intrigue around like her friends and her boyfriend, and she starts to wonder if maybe her friend that went missing is dating the same guy as her. So there's a lot of intrigue in this book, and I feel like in general Frida McFadden books are just so easily digestible, and such like a quick read. Even if you're like physically reading it, listening to the audiobook, they're just so good. Like honestly, I recommend Frida McFadden books the most if you're in a reading slump, because they're just so intriguing. I don't know what it is about her mystery thriller books specifically. They can drag me out of any slump. Like I have to read it immediately. They're so good. So I feel like it was extremely predictable. Okay, but I don't know. If you've read this book, let me know if you guessed what happened. I did towards the end, but like I kind of had a suspicion in the beginning, and then I kind of like let it go, and then I came back. Next book I listened to was Last Place Seen by Alessandra Harris. About a family. It follows our main character Tiana, who her husband has been previously incarcerated, and he ends up being investigated as a person of interest in this disappearance of this girl who was kidnapped at a Walmart while he was also at the same Walmart at the same time, just shopping with his kid. And through this book you can kind of tell that there's a lot of resentment between the couple, because they have like a good relationship, but you can just tell there's resentment because like he's not able to get a job, and she's kind of supporting the family and dealing with all of the stress of different situations with him and being previously incarcerated. So you can just tell that there's kind of a lot of angst with that. And then it brings in a lot of other issues with it tying in with this girl being kidnapped, and how it kind of relates to her family and other people in her family and her life that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with her husband. And it is very interesting. I feel like there was just a lot going on, and I'm kind of like, why is this all happening? But I'm like, it's kind of cool that they like brought in so many different points, but also it did leave me kind of like, okay, like what's going on? Very confused. I do feel like the ending, I don't want to say it was necessarily predictable, but I did definitely guess what was going to happen, but I feel like that happens anytime now. So anytime that I say something is predictable, it's not necessarily predictable. I think I've just listened and read too many like podcasts and books on true crime. So I just kind of like have an ear or eye for it, I guess. Brain for it. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, I gave that one a 2 out of 5 stars. I don't think that it was like bad, but I just don't think that I would like ever really think about it again unless someone was like, have you read this book? Then I'd be like, oh yeah, it was all right. Read Immortal Dark by Tejas Gurma. This one was pretty good. It's a vampire book, Vampire Academy, very like sultry, dark fall vibes, and I actually read this one outside when it was dark on my porch swing, and I put on a playlist that was like an Immortal Dark playlist. It was such a vibe, guys. Like, honestly, I think the vibe is what made this book a 4 out of 5 stars for me, because I don't think I necessarily loved the characters that much or like the plot even, but as a whole, I think it was just like a vibe. Like, I think the vibe of the book was good. I don't know if the plot and the characters were my favorite though, if that makes sense. Dead Things Are Closer Than They Appear by Robin Weasley. This book was a 3.5 out of 5 stars for me. I was so excited. I thought this book was going to be a 5 out of 5 stars for me because I'm a big dystopian YA girl. Like, that's what I grew up on. Those were my favorite books to read, and this book fell a little bit flat for me, okay? Just towards the end, the beginning was really good, and then towards the end I kind of lost it. But honestly, it felt a lot like if a dystopian book. I liked that it had a lot of characters, but it didn't focus too much on relationships. It also focused a lot on the plot. I just feel like the plot was a little bit confusing. Like, certain things in the magical realm were very confusing, but I did like the kind of like Walking Dead zombie-esque, you know, vibe. I liked that. But the end of the world thing, you know, I love that. But I just feel like a little bit of it was like very confusing. But one thing that I do love is that this was a YA that had witty banter, good one-liners. Like, I need that in a book. That's what I love about dystopians. I feel like they always have the funniest characters. I don't know, but I really like the main character, and like the writing for her, I feel like it was really good. But especially towards the beginning. Towards the end, I feel like it fell off a little bit, which is what always makes me so annoyed. But yeah, it was pretty good. Not my favorite, but I still enjoyed it. I read A Mother Would Know by Amber Garza. This book was a 3 out of 5 stars for me. I actually really liked this one. This was another audiobook thriller mystery book I read, and I liked it. I don't think that it was my favorite, and I do feel like it was very predictable, but I still feel like it was very enjoyable. I liked, my cat is staring at me upside down right now. It's so funny. What is wrong with you? But I do feel like I enjoyed reading it. I feel like it held my attention really well. It's basically about a mother who's widowed, and she is a mother of her son and daughter. Her daughter's grown up, she has a kid, she's like very successful, and she's living the good life. Her son is not doing so well. He's recently broken up with his girlfriend, moved out of her place, and he's now moved back in with his mother, and she's just kind of suspicious of him. Like, a girl ends up disappearing from his workplace that he was kind of close to, and his mom ends up becoming very suspicious and thinking that he kind of has something to do with it. So she kind of starts to like personally investigate, but also like he's living with her, and it kind of seems like she has a lot of like very dark past too, so you kind of get to dive into that a little bit. And I think it was just really interesting that there were a lot of different plot points. I like when there's a thriller that has like, this is happening, but then like, you know, we're also like kind of figuring out more about the person that's investigating what's happening. Like, it's not just, oh, what did this person do? It's like, oh shoot, like, is she even like, is she good? Is she like losing her mind a little bit, you know? So I liked that, but I do feel like they could have done something really cool and like much different with the ending. But anyway, I did still like this book. I enjoyed it more than the next couple that I read. So, The Vanishing Hour by Serafina Nova Glass. This one was not my favorite. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. I honestly can't even really tell you that much about it. It was It was just not my favorite. There were so many different plot points. Like, it follows a man who goes back home to visit his family because his dad has gone missing. And then it also follows like two different women or two different girls missing. There's different people looking for them. Like, one's mom is looking for her. The other one was like a foster child. So like someone's looking for her, but it's not her. I'm not sure who it is. And then there's another girl that like owns the inn, and like she had been kidnapped as a child. But there's so many different points. There's like these older men that are going missing, but then there's also these young girls that are going missing and being, it was just very confusing. And I don't know if it was just because it was an audiobook, but I just did not like the writing. I didn't like the story. It just felt so discombobulated, and it was not a vibe for me. So definitely did not really like that one. Every Vow You Break by Peter Swanson. This I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked this one. I felt like it was really interesting. It follows a girl who meets this man who is like infatuated with her. He's a billionaire. He's super cool, super suave, like the perfect guy, has a lot of money. But she just feels like they're not quite too compatible. Like, she just has this like very like restless energy, and she ends up getting really drunk at her bachelorette party and having a one-night stand with this random guy. And then she kind of just tries to forget about it and go her fiance, and she just kind of tries to forget about it. She doesn't tell him because she knows it'll ruin everything. And then they get to their honeymoon destination, and it's just this very strange place. There's a lot of men there, and it's like very closed off, and this very like remote location. Everyone, like the people who are there are just very strange. And then she ends up seeing the guy there that she had a one-night stand with, and she kind of feels like he's following her, and it was just very twisted. It was a very strange story, but I really liked it. I liked that it was like, it wasn't quite as predictable. It had a lot of twists and turns, and I actually really liked it. I feel like it was actually more of a 4 out of 5 stars because of how much I feel like I don't really get a lot of like mystery thriller books lately that I don't predict. And this one, like, I kind of predicted it, but like I also didn't. Like, there were moments where I was like, this is kind of confusing. So yeah, I actually really like this one. And I read Any Man by Amber Tamblyn. This one I didn't rate because I didn't end up finishing towards the end. There were like 30 minutes left of the audiobook, and I was just like so confused. It was like a short story about, it was like multiple short stories, and the writing style was just not my favorite. It had that very like indie poetic writing style, and not that I don't like poetry or indie writing, but I just wasn't, I don't know if it was the audiobook or what, but I just wasn't really enjoying this book, so I ended up DNFing this one. And then I read Did I Kill You by Harper Shaw. This one I gave a 1 star because I just did not like the main character. I feel like the book was so, the writing style was so not my favorite. I also saw a lot of reviews after I finished it that like people weren't liking it and were giving it like 1 stars. So yeah, I kind of feel like it was just not a vibe for me. I did not like the writing. I did not like the main character. Like, literally the whole main character's vibe was woe is me, everybody hates me, and like everybody did hate her. It was so weird. It was so twisted, and the whole style of the book was like not my favorite, and it was so predictable. So very predictable, the ending. So I didn't really like that one at all. Then I read The Secret of Poppy Ridge Cove by Remy London. This was just like a short little kind of like childish wonder, cozy book about a girl who finds this like beautiful house, but it's like in disrepair and it needs fixed up. And she ends up coming into like a ton of money and being able to buy it, but like it's very strange. Creepy things are happening, like dead animal carcasses are showing up at the house, and the neighbors are kind of strange, and it's just a very like spooky, cozy book. And I didn't like love it, but I do feel like it was an easy, quick read, and I enjoyed it. I don't think that I'll read the rest of the series though. Then I read The Things I Didn't Do by Charlotte Barnes. This was a DNF for me. It was a mystery thriller book about a woman whose husband died, and she had basically been accused of doing it, but she ends up having this writer come in and like listen to her story so that she can have her like write the story. And I guess there's more to it than that, but I didn't finish it, so I can't tell you. And then the last book I read was Five Survived by Holly Jackson. This book I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was really good. I like the setting of like being in one place in one time, and kind of being in like this time crunch, but you're finding out different things from the past, but you're still in this one setting. I like that. I think that those are really interesting, especially like movies even like this. But it's about like 6 different kids, I think, that go camping in this camper, and as they're trying to get to their location, somebody starts shooting at them, and it seems like very heavy for a bunch of high schoolers, but it was actually very interesting. They end up kind of turning on each other, trying to figure out like why someone is shooting at them and trying to figure out like who it is and who's at fault. And it's very twisty, very turny. Like everything that was happening was kind of crazy. The ending was a little strange, but I also feel like it was what it was meant to be. So I really did enjoy this one. And yeah, I just feel like Holly Jackson can do no wrong. She is one of, I just love her books. Like she's really grown on me a lot recently, especially with all the books that I've read by her I've really liked. So whether it's audiobook or physically reading, her books are just gonna do it every time, especially for YA. I feel like they're really good and like not too like naive writing, but still like easily digestible. So yeah, that's gonna be it. That's it. That's all that I read. The other book I'm reading is Anatomy, a Love Story, and that one's pretty good. I'm liking it so far, but I'm not done with it yet. And then but yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys want to see what I'm reading next, make sure that you subscribe. And yeah, that's gonna be it for this video. Bye.